Deaf Children Australia was established over 150 years ago in 1862 in response to the needs of a deaf child, Lucy Lewis, and her family. This was at a time when the colony was very young and the support for children with additional needs did not exist. There were no schools for deaf children anywhere in Australia at that time. Deaf Children Australia's Bluestone Building was built on St Kilda Road, Melbourne in 1866 to provide a home and school for them, a home of deaf education and support ever since. In the 1950s, when this footage was taken, the students had regular audiology tests to assess their hearing. As past student George Walker reflects, "My auntie would often talk to me and think I wasn't paying attention. My mum was also in denial. It was only when they dropped a silver tray which didn't startle me that they accepted I had a hearing loss. My parents wanted me to learn speech at the Victorian Deaf and Dumb Institute, as it was then known. I had a lot of deficits in my speech, and I went through a lot of speech therapy to improve my voice. Up until the 1950s, the preschool children were based at the Victorian Deaf and Dumb Institution, along with primary and high school students. One girl from the country lived at the Bluestone Building from when she was 3 years old until she finished school as a teenager, and only went home some weekends. Then, in 1950, the Princess Elizabeth Kindergarten for the Deaf was established in Burwood as the first residential and daily preschool centre for deaf children in Australia. The W.D. Cook Centre was built next to the Bluestone Building in St Kilda Road in 1957. It was a kindergarten for deaf children of deaf parents who preferred to sign to communicate, rather than learning spoken language like most of the preschoolers at the Princess Elizabeth Kindergarten. Life was pretty active for the pupils at St Kilda Road, with lots of sports, along with scouts and girl guides. For many years, the boys learned woodwork, plumbing and metalwork, while girls learnt cooking, sewing and home economics. It was hoped this would give them future employment opportunities. Sign language was taught in the classrooms in the 1960s, and English was the second language for many children. The pupils' favourite playground activities back in those days were Ring-a-Ring-a Rosie, tag, brandy, football and hopscotch. The gardens always provided a beautiful environment to play in. Pupils and boarders were mostly restricted to staying on the premises at St Kilda Road, with occasional excursions which brought much excitement. Most boarders would only go home once every 3 weeks, but during World War II, the children were evacuated to Marysville, along with the teachers who hadn't enlisted as soldiers. The RAAF took over the Bluestone Building during this time, and the children enjoyed a whole new level of freedom in the bush. Keeping the children fit and active was a priority, and the students enjoyed a lot of competitive sports with other schools. Past student Stan Batson said, "I played cricket and football. I was not so confident when I was first given a football." One father at the school was the chairman, and he thought it wasn't right that we were such wusses. So he wanted all of us to play football. Soon, we were pushing and shoving like other boys our age. We played matches against Wesley and South Yarra schools. Boys and girls marched in separate lines to and from the building for classes, meals and playtimes. Boys and girls were kept separated, with their dormitories at each end of the Bluestone Building. They mixed only during school classes and mealtimes. There was a fence built high and long to the back of the Bluestone Building, which separated the boys and girls in the playground. After 150 years, we can reflect back on the history of Deaf Children Australia and see how community attitudes have changed and the landscape of education has altered for deaf children. Deaf Children Australia has evolved from being a boarding school for deaf children to now supporting the Victorian College of the Deaf, who continue to educate children on our grounds, along with addressing the social and emotional needs of deaf children around Australia, the majority of whom attend mainstream schools. Deaf Children Australia supports children who are deaf and hard of hearing to enjoy equal opportunities to fulfil their potential and live life to the full.